You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Barricini, and Alex Hobson.
Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to episode 174 of Sticks in the Six, brought to you by the fine folks at the Hockey Podcast Network, a proud member of the Hockey Podcast Network family. We're also brought to you by DraftKings, BetterHelp, SeatGeek, and the Indie Ale House. And Peter, the preseason is coming to a close. There is a lot of news coming out of the Atlantic Division right now. Before we get into any of that, though, we're obviously going to be doing a little bit of a season preview here. We'll get through all four divisions fairly quickly tonight. But before any of that, how are you doing this week?
Doing great, man. Yeah, no, I think it's been a while. I was going to say a while, 3 days since we last recorded. But you know what? We might as well get the recording in this time when our schedules are open, kind of thing. But doing good. You know, I was mentioning off the air because my allergies have been, in full swing the last 2-3 weeks, where I was on again, off again, and it's back to being on again. So, I've been, just popping cough drops. I've been drinking water. I'm just not feeling it right now at the same time, but you got to power through it, But yeah, like you mentioned, hockey's on its way back. There are only 2 more games for the Leafs right now. And by the time you know it, it's literally a week. Puck drop is the season opener next week, Leafs and Canadiens. And we already talked about the bad blood that spilled over in that Maple Leafs game against Montreal. So we'll see what happens, because it's definitely looking like it's going to carry over. The animosity, everything is just going to be a bloodbath kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, normally in this instance, we'd be getting ready for the season to begin. We'd be counting down the days, looking at the last 2 preseason matchups for the Leafs. That said, we're going to get into all the divisions, like I said, but we have to talk about the news coming out of the Atlantic. And first off, I think preseason or not, I think I've already got the Montreal Canadiens fans against the Sticks in the Six podcast. I posted a short to YouTube today questioning the Department of Player Safety, questioning George Parros, questioning Arber Xhekaj, and I mean they flood the comments. All kudos to them. They love their team. They respect their team. We'd be the same way if it was
absolutely
roles were reversed. The problem being is that they're taking it all out of context. So a lot of them saying it wasn't a hit to the head. Nowhere in the video did I mention it was a hit to the head. It was a blindside hit under Rule 48.1. It's a blindside hit so long as they're not within 90-degree vision of the player that they are hitting. Now, that aside, my biggest thing was not so much about Xhekaj's play, albeit very dangerous. My criticism was to the Department of Player Safety and George Parros and his inability to really structure any kind of consistency and regulation when it comes to player safety. Your job is literally player safety. And one, we saw a Todd Bertuzzi-esque punch to the side of the head, which we talked about last episode. Second was a Mark Savard career-ending hit on Tim Stützle. Yeah. Whether it was his stick that bumped his face, whether it was any of that crap, the point being was Arber Xhekaj. You had a chance with the Bertuzzi-esque assault, on ice assault, to really set the tone. Give him 2 preseason games, whatever, set the tone, right? You didn't do that. You gave him a $3,300 fine, pocket change for a guy who's, making the big dollars in the NHL on his NHL contract, and he comes right back out and does another stupid play. I mean, we're talking about he's on the verge of being a Rafi Torres type of player, where like every time he goes to hit somebody, you're going to hold your breath and hope to hell it's not a dirty play. And I personally, like, being a Maple Leafs person, like a fan, whatever you want to call me, somebody who covers the Maple Leafs, I actually love Xhekaj's game. He's gritty, he likes to get in there, but it's teetering that line, and he's starting to play a little bit more over the line than he is within the rules. I want to get your take on Arber Xhekaj. I want to get your take on George Parros. We're in the preseason, and already we are talking about the Department of Player Safety's inability to keep players safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's like literally 48 to 72 hours after Xhekaj did what he did to Cedric Paré. And again, you could go back to the last episode that we talked about. Yeah, a statement needed to be said. Yeah, it wasn't possibly an intentional knee on Laine. Paré didn't say that, or he said that it wasn't intentional. It felt like he probably could have led up in a tough situation or a tough area. But, and again, I agree that a message needs to be sent when one of your top players goes down. But to do what you did with your gloves on, repeatedly punching someone in the back of the head, that to me, that's not even worth a fine. That's a 2-game suspension right there. And, and because he had a fine this time, or with that instance, and we see the chicken wing, blindside hit to Tim Stützle, we thought, okay, there has to be something this time around. Nope. So you can basically repeatedly punch someone in the back of the head multiple times, get a fine, chicken wing somebody, and get no suspension at all. Because he literally had a major and he was tossed out of that game again. And you're basically allowing that to happen. And you're setting the standard that, yeah, that's okay. And then when someone else is going to have the same situation happen to them, they're going to go back to this instance like they have many times in the previous seasons. High sticks, punches, slew foots, anything. They go back and they say, well, this was only this. Why is this getting a lesser or major or more of a heftier fine or suspension kind of thing? There is no consistency whatsoever. It just absolutely boggles my mind that we're still continuing to have this conversation before there's even puck drop in the regular season. And we've even talked about, the play of Matt Rempe last year too. Guy comes in, making play, not necessarily making plays, but he's standing up, he's fighting, he's making a name for himself. I do like the way that Xhekaj plays. I really think that he has that physical play that can strike fear into the opponent's eyes, just like Rempe does. But when you do stupid plays and you do things that can be detrimental to your team, that's going to come back to haunt you. And there's going to have to be a talk between St. Louis and Xhekaj being, listen, love your intensity. I love that every single game. But now this is 2 instances in back-to-back games where there were very questionable and very suspension-worthy instances where you could have been gone. So to me, there needs to be that line where, yeah, you got to trade that line, but don't cross it like you have been in literally 2 games. And again, I say the same thing for Rempe. I say any player that, has that mean streak, that physicality and tone to their game. If you could play, great. If you had that aspect to your game, great. But do not cross that line because it puts a lot of players' lives in, or not players. I mean, yeah, it puts a lot of players' lives in jeopardy because it's the fact that something serious could happen to them. They could be out an extended period of time. And I know the Habs fans are going to come out and say, oh, but, Paré, knocked Laine out for 2 to 3 months. Again, go back to the last episode where we talked about that. I felt that maybe even though it wasn't intentional on Paré's part, I think he shouldn't have stepped up. Yeah, it was a bad outcome. Maybe you could have suspended or given, fines to both players based on what happened. That's just my opinion. But it's just at a point now where we're talking about lowering the amount of preseason games because of massive injuries. We're talking about, star players being injured already. Doughty, Laine. Stützle is probably going to be out for, I haven't seen an update yet, but there's a possibility he could be out for an extended period of time. Who knows? But it's just getting really tiring right now with, you're seeing all these reckless plays, but also Department of Player Safety just allowing it to happen constantly, nonstop, over and over again. It's just getting very tiresome.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it, but the biggest thing was there's no supplemental discipline on this second play.
Yeah.
There's nothing. And people are, like I said, people are coming out and saying, well, it's not a hit to the head. That's not the argument that's being made. And you mentioned, too, that the 2 of us on this podcast last episode said that Cedric Paré should have been suspended as well. Mm-hmm. Regardless of the intention, it was a knee-on-knee play. It goes against the rule book. Your job as the Department of Player Safety is to protect the players. Now you have a guy who's potentially one of the biggest stars in Ottawa right now. Like, I mean, you got Tkachuk and then you've got Stützle. And you're going to let Xhekaj kind of skate in and throw that blindside hit and skate off, scot-free. He didn't even get pounded in by Tkachuk, which, he did the exact opposite to Paré.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like, I would have been okay with the Paré, like the way he responded to Paré. You know, you had to expect there was going to be a response. The way Line A went down, you give him 2 punches, he's on the ground. You've sent your message.
Yeah.
He completely pummeled this guy
afterwards
while he's on the ground. It goes against every grain of a hockey player's mindset. That it goes against that invisible code that
I was just about to say the invisible unwritten code, the rule.
Right. So the fact that George Peros, like, this is still it's mind-numbing for me, because we're talking about it with 2 preseason games left and the season hasn't even started. It's going to be a long fucking season with this guy at the helm. It's going to be a long season watching this guy hand out maybe the shittiest disciplinary action that we've seen in recent years. And we talked about how bad it was before. One of the comments on the video, the short that I put on YouTube, was that, why aren't we complaining about the referees? Well, because we did that for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So at what point does it, we like, how many times did we say, hold the refs accountable, have a press conference after with your 2 referees, they answer the questions that need to be asked. It forces them to be more accountable. We're far past that.
Yeah.
Xhekaj was thrown out. That was the call that should have been made. Now it's on the disciplinarian, who is George Peros, and he has yet to come up and make the right call in the 3 or 4 or 5 years that he's been at the helm in terms of the Department of Player Safety. It's asinine. It makes the league look like a joke. You're going to see your star players going out because of plays like that, and then you're going to be questioning why, your star players aren't playing in the preseason, and why you're not making any ticket revenue on the preseason. Because nobody's going to want to go see your third string players that you're sending down within 2 weeks. It's like, from a business standpoint, this makes sense. From a player safety standpoint, this makes sense. When does it make sense to the Department of Player Safety itself?
It's going to be years. It's going to be years before that actually makes any sense, because they're going to keep talking about this next year, the year after that, and so on. I mean, I don't want to say it is what it is, but it's sad that we have to say that, because it shouldn't be like this when player safety is on the line. Like, again, it could be the difference between, setting and not even that. I don't know where I was going initially, but my main thought is you need to set that precedent of, this is going to be the standard going forward for stuff like this, for repeated cheap shots when a player's defenseless, for blindside chicken wing clipping hits or whatever. We don't even know that. We don't even know, like, the standard for, like, intentional high sticking, which we got that with Morgan Riley last year. He immediately got suspended. Meanwhile, somebody else got a fine. So it's like, where's the consistency? Where's the standard? There's nothing at this point. Again, we said this many times before. It's just like darts at a board at this point. This is basically what these last 2 instances were. Darts at a board. Okay, fine one time. Okay, yeah. Second time, nah, you're good. I mean, what are we doing here? Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I mean, we said it before. I'll say it again. Expect game 1 of the season to be something out of this world when Toronto meets Montreal. It's going to be especially if Xhekaj's in the lineup. Expect Reeves to be in the lineup. Expect there to be a tilt in the first 10 minutes of the game. The writing's on the wall at this point. And I'll tell you, first matchup between Montreal and Ottawa, you're going to be looking at the same thing. The writing's on the wall.
Kachuk and Xhekaj going back at it.
Yeah, I'm sure nobody's going to forget in that short span of time. But
so it looks like we just lost Andrew Forbes. So as we were talking about everything going on, he was basically alluding to, imagine something's going to happen at one point, and look, there he is. He's back.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, guys. I'm not sure what happened there.
I was about to say, I'm just taking the reins here to try and get it to the next point and just talk to myself with my own thoughts for a second, and then all of a sudden you came back. So at least that's a good thing right there.
No problem. It's I mean, There you go. A little blip
Technical
in the
difficulties, you know.
little blip in the radar. That's what happens when you're jumping from screen to screen, I guess. But
I think there's also a sign where we probably just got to move on from department player safety kind of thing.
Yeah, because we're just talking. We're just throwing darts at a board right now, trying to change something that's never going to change. Anyways, we got to talk about Jeremy Swayman. He's got 64 million reasons to play, and yet he's not on the roster. The Boston Bruins just picked up another goaltender on waivers today. Peter, this went from a situation where it seemed like the Bruins had things under control. The Jeremy Swayman thing seemed like it was going to work itself out. Swayman wanted to be there, to now there's speculation and rumors flying that maybe Swayman doesn't want to be there anymore after the way it was handled at the press conference. I got to get before we even jump on the Swayman agent train here, the second you heard Cam Neely come out and say he has $64 million reasons to play, what was your takeaway from that?
Cam, what are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? Like, usually the contract negotiations are something, kept close to both sides' hearts. It's kept close to the agent, player, team, you name it. For him to come out and actually give a number that reportedly wasn't even offered to them just throws another wrench into the story where it's like, okay, he's remained unsigned to this point. You throw a number out there, and now that number is wrong where it wasn't even offered to them. So it's like, and I even think I think there was a bit of an interaction between Don Sweeney too and Cam Neely where they were kind of like going back and forth here, where maybe he is what he's worth kind of thing. And I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the full interview, but it kind of seemed like they were, Sweeney was saying one thing about Swayman, and then Neely was saying the other. So to me, that there's not just a rift right now with player, agent, and team, but also GM and president right now. No.
Absolutely.
That's how I'm looking at that. But overall, it's just like when Cam Neely said that, it's basically everything is over. Like Jeremy Swayman holds all the cards right now. It's like either one, you pay me whatever I want now, whether that's 64 million or more. Personally, I don't think he's anywhere in that stratosphere of 10 million plus. I do think 8.5 is a reasonable number for him because he doesn't have a long body of work. Doesn't have a full season of work under his belt, but he is a damn good goalie that you want to keep long term. Number two, if he's unhappy with that, and like they said that they want to take a few days to regroup and come back with a clear head with everything, if he comes back and he wants to trade, there goes Boston's any chance of possibly even making the playoffs. And we're going to get to that in the season preview. But you traded away Ullmark in the hopes of retaining Swayman and signing him. Now there's a slim possibility that he is gone and you don't have a legitimate number one starter in your crease right now, where you're going to have to rely on Jonas Korpisalo, who has been very inconsistent and his numbers have been up and down throughout his NHL career. Granted, he was on the Columbus Blue Jackets the last few seasons. They haven't been that great, but he has looked great in the preseason so far. But can he manage to continue that into the regular season and go on those long stretches where he can handle 50, 60 games? Now you claim Yuri Patera up or you claim them off waivers, where now it just basically seems like, those are your two goalies now heading into the season. Yeah. Like it's just mind boggling right now that you had two of the best goalies as one of the best tandems last season. And now there's a slim chance that you're going to get none of them returning to your team.
So here's the way I see it. You moved on from Ullmark because you knew that in re-signing Swayman, you would not be able to afford both. So you moved on from Ullmark. You sent him to Ottawa. That was done. The belief was that Swayman and the Boston Bruins would get something done, no problem. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm on the same train as you, where this guy hasn't played more than 43 games in any given season. So is he an unbelievable goalie? Absolutely. He's an unbelievable goalie that we've only seen for 43 games in a regular season. Looking at their backup with Korpisalo, I mean, he's hit and miss. He can have some good games. He can have some terrible games. You're going to rely on Swayman to play likely in the 50 to 60 game range. Disagree?
No, I fully agree. I mean,
so
I'm on the same boat as you, because you look at the amount of games that he's played. 40, like I'm not going to count 2020, 21, but 41, 37, 44, the last 3 seasons. Like you said, if you're going to rely on him to play 50, 60 games, again, you better be getting your money's worth.
Right. So you're gonna rely on him to play 60 games this year. You don't know what you have in a 60-game goalie when it comes to Jeremy Swayman. To me, even $8 million was a stretch. I truly believe. Now,
I can see that.
The problem is the market was changed when the Edmonton Oilers signed Jack Campbell to 5.5 or wherever the hell they signed him to, and now his contract's been terminated. Goaltenders tend to be like a little bit of a running back situation in football, where like right now they're a dime a dozen. Aiden Hill won a Stanley Cup. Alex Lyon was on a Stanley Cup winning team. Like there's a little bit more of a question mark around some of these goaltenders. You can get by if you have solid defense with a mediocrity in net. Now, in saying that, I truly believe that you need to pay him to make him stay, to make him want to stay, and you need to give him term. So the likely answer was 8x8. That is not part of the Boston Bruins culture. The Boston Bruins culture has always been star players take less to make a contending team. That changed when Pasternak signed. That changed when Charlie McAvoy signed. Yep. And now it's changing with Jeremy Swayman. And I think the mentality of the Boston Bruins front office is like, well, what the hell here? We're going to give you 8x8 or 8x7 or 7.8x8, which, let's round up to 64 million. And we expect you to take it. Well, the way of the new NHL is that you bet on yourself.
Yep.
So you're going to sign an 8-year contract, but you're going to load it up and you're going to ask for 9.5 rather than the 8 million that you might get out on the market. So that's where this whole situation's become a bit of a debacle. Now, the negotiations aside, when Cam Neely came out at the press conference and basically said, he's got 64 million reasons to play, you blew it right out of the water.
Yeah, it's over. It's over.
That was it. And one, why the hell would Jeremy Swayman want to play for that organization anymore?
Right now, exactly.
Two, if he did, you're asking for well over 8 million now per season. Because now
you're making an uncomfortable situation for them.
Your president of hockey ops went out there and just essentially put into the public what your negotiations are and what you've turned down. You're going to have fans that turn against you. You're going to have some teammates being like, man, what the hell? We're trying to go for another win here. It changes the culture in the room. That's what Cam Neely did with that press conference. And now he's going to stand by it. He's not going to comment on it, whatever.
Oh, if he went back on it right now, it's just going to throw another wrench into the whole entire debacle.
Exactly. So now that it's come out that wasn't actually the offer, it was 7.8 million, give or take. Now it's just become an even bigger story. And I would be shocked, and we will get into this. We'll do the Atlantic right off the hop, but I would be shocked if Jeremy Swayman starts the season in a Boston Bruins uniform in Game 1. I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
And if he did, he might be doing his own off-ice training, but he's had no gameplay through the preseason.
And nobody's going to like that I'm going to say this, but it's kind of like William Nylander's situation where, different circumstances, but it's going to be at a point where, first 1 or 2 years, maybe a little bit even more front loaded because of the time missed that he's going to make up for that. So with all the games lost, that contract may look a little bit heftier front loaded because that's what happened with Nylander in his first year. I believe it was 11 million with the amount that he missed, and then it decreased after that, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah.
That's just where I'm going with that too, because and even if he does come back, he's still a step or two behind everybody else right now.
Well, and that's
a problem for Boston.
Let's not forget the production that Nylander put up in his first year or his first part year after he held out.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of where we're at with the Swayman situation. I personally love it. I love it for the rest of the Atlantic. I think it's fantastic for the Leafs.
I think it's great for us because everyone is like, oh, Auston Matthews is going to leave. Nylander's going to leave. Marner's going to leave. Well, that's still to be debated. But now it's like everybody else is having their own contract issues right now. It's not just Toronto. So I'm just sitting back and just grabbing my popcorn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. That said, we're going to get into the season previews here. We're going to try and be fairly quick, as I told you off the show. It's a school night for the kid, so we got to get him home and make sure he's getting his sleep. He's still a little rambunctious 4-year-old, so
don't want no late nights, man.
That's right. Don't start the bad habits. But before we get into that, just a quick word from one of our sponsors over at DraftKings Sportsbook. TD Tutty in the 6. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports book partner of the NHL. We don't care how they score them. We want them to be We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Or you could be like me, try to parlay 6 touchdown scores together, throw, $3 to $5 on it, make a couple hundred. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in Connecticut. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. Well, I know I will be betting on an Austin Matthews goal in Game 1 because why wouldn't you? The Atlantic Division is on fire. There's going to be a heated matchup in Game 1 when the Toronto Maple Leafs meet up with the Montreal Canadiens. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I believe it'll be a pretty hefty scoring affair. Not sure Sam Montembeault is ready to take on those Maple Leafs, but with that said, let's start it off with those lowly Montreal Canadiens. What are your thoughts on the Montreal Canadiens heading into the season?
This is going to be one of those, again, it's still a transition period for them. And I think, obviously, the loss of Patrick Laine is definitely huge. I think they wanted to bounce back. He wanted to bounce back. If you were to get like a Laine of 30-60, I think that's a big win for both sides. But they're still in that transition period where, still a lot of pieces need to come into play. I think they still need a top-tier goaltender. But then again, as long as you just get steady goaltending, it doesn't matter if it's a big name or not. Who basically cares at that point? Montembeault has looked good. He looked pretty steady at certain points last season, but I still think this is going to be a year where they're going to be at the bottom of the standings again because they want to push for meaningful games later on, but at the same time, I think they're just still a little bit ways away compared to the other teams that are ahead of them right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the addition of Laine would have been huge. Obviously, they saw that injury in the same game. They saw Reinbacher go down. He's out with a knee injury. Obviously, had surgery on that as well. So that's bad news after bad news. That said, I think, too, you got to look at their back end. Right now, goaltending's kind of a question mark. Caden Primo, there's some, he's unproven. Sam Montembeault, you've got a little bit more to deal with there in terms of sample size, but overall this team is they're getting there, and that's the thing that obviously Habs fans need to know is that there's a lot of exciting players coming up in the next few years. You got an Owen Beck, Caden Gooley's probably going to be there this year. He's going to be exciting to watch. David Reinbacher, Slavkovsky's finally coming into his own. Caulfield's hitting his prime. Suzuki's your leader. Man, this kid's phenomenal as well. This is going to be an exciting team in a couple years.
Yeah.
2024-25 is just not it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not making the playoffs in my books.
Yeah, same here. I mean, and again, when you look at the other teams that are ahead of them right now that are actually pushing for one of those wild card spots, which is actually going to be, a battle to the very end. You know, when you look at Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, they all have reasons to take that next step. Obviously, Buffalo, they've really haven't had steady goaltending. I think that's going to be different this year. Hopefully, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen can be that starter and find some consistency in his game. Detroit, they were just, just on the edge of making the playoffs. And then, it came to that final day where it just didn't quite work out. And now Ottawa with Linus Ullmark in the fold, do they enter the equation and surpass both Buffalo and Detroit to push themselves and vault themselves into a playoff spot? That, to me, those three teams are in a separate tier themselves right now that are ahead of Montreal, but are still below in that conversation of the other top teams in the Atlantic Division right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jumping over to another bubble team, the Ottawa Senators. And again, their first line looks incredible. Some of their young D, incredible. There's a lot of question marks around this team. You could jump to goaltending again. Linus Ullmark, he's been great over the last couple of seasons. He's also played only 50% of the games over the last couple of seasons as well in Boston. So, what are you seeing from the Ottawa Senators going into the 2024-25 season?
I see a team that could definitely push for the playoffs, that could even make the playoffs. I mean, again, goaltending was the one issue that has plagued them the last few seasons because they definitely, like you said, they have the talent up front. You have a decent back end right now where Jake Sanderson is looking like he's going to pop off on a, basically coming out party season for him. I know he was fantastic last year, but this is going to be another big step for him because they drafted him because this is going to be his blue line. And in the preseason, he looked absolutely dangerous. He was fantastic, both offensively and defensively. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Carter Yakimchuk is still in camp. I don't think he got sent back down just yet. I'm going to have
sent down yet.
So there's a possibility that he looks fantastic in preseason. Is he going to make that jump right away? There was question about his defense, but he's looking pretty good. So you have one of your top prospects making that jump right now, an offensive producer that's probably going to be third pairing type of player, but you're going to get a lot of impact from him if he gets those minutes. But the way that the offense is set up front, the way that Jake Sanderson is going to take that big step, and the way that you have Linus Ullmark right now in net, you are basically looking as your goal is to make the playoffs this season. The last few seasons, there was doubt. This year, I think is a good possibility for Ottawa.
Yeah, I'm not sold yet. I love their top line, Tkachuk, Stützle, and Batherson. On the back end, I think Artem Zub is a super underrated defenseman. Jake Sanderson's there, Thomas Chabot. Their third pairing, I mean, again, you mentioned Yakimchuk. I would assume he's going to get sent down. My biggest thing is going to be the depth up front. You did bring in David Perron, a guy who can certainly put the puck in that, but he is aging. He's coming up on 37 years old, which makes me feel old. You've got Claude Giroux, who's, again, another veteran presence. Big question mark on Josh Norris and how his health is going to hold up this season. Ridley Grigg, Shane Pinto. There's a lot of question marks in terms of depth, and that's been the question mark with the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. So could they be a playoff team? Absolutely. I think right now with the way the playoffs are set up, they are the victims of the NHL's playoff setup. That's the way I see it. I think they fall short because of the fact that the top three from each division and then two wild cards make it. I think the Metro is going to be something to look at when we talk about those two wild card spots. But for me, they're not making it. I think they're just, again, they come just shy, but they are going to have a better season than they did last year, no doubt whatsoever. We got to jump to the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit Red Wings, Yzerman, the Yzer plan, if falling off the Shanna plan, and it's all these former Detroit Red Wings with their plans as presidents and whatever. But they brought back Kane. They've got some youth coming up. They've got a 5 goalie depth chart right now. What's your take on the Detroit Red Wings?
Raymond, I think getting Raymond and Seider locked up long-term, that was the ultimate goal. And luckily it happened around the same time camp was just opening up. So they got their 2 main pieces of their core intact or already signed. So that's huge. Again, great depth up front with Larkin. Vladimir Tarasenko, I think, is probably going to bounce back. Given how he had his moments. He had 41 points with Ottawa, 14 with Florida, won the Stanley Cup, so he's got that championship pedigree with him right now. I think he's good for still 60 points. I think that they got good balance, and maybe Patrick Kane is still, the verdict is out on him still because of the injury. Again, 47 points last season, down year, but he is getting up there in age. I think he knows that he's going to be in a different role this time around. Defense, I feel like they're set up front. Like they got some quality pieces, but on the back end, you're still going back to the same defense that you had last season. And you're looking at Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall, Jeff Petrie, who's aging as well. You signed Eric Gustafsson. You have Simon Edmondson coming up, which is a big plus, but you have a lot of aging players or like players in their 30s, but are still very hit and miss. And when you look at that, plus the fact that you have an aging Cam Talbot, who, again, hit or miss last season. Ville Husso missed a good chunk of last season. Your goaltending and defense is going to be the biggest X factor right now. If you could get some steady defense, great, but I'm not sold on that goaltending just yet. And it's definitely going to be something to look at because I think it could be a reason why they may fall further down and maybe miss out this year again because of that inconsistency, because of the names that they have, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. So, again, forwards are set. It's just the defense and goaltending I'm very, very concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, look, like there's teams in the division that are going to take steps forward, and to do so, other teams have to take steps back. The Red Wings, I think, overperformed last season. They just missed out on the playoffs, and I think, you nailed it. The depth on the back end, the question marks in net right now. Right now, you got Ville Husso as potentially your third string goalie behind two other questionable goalies in Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon. I mean, Cam Talbot's going to be 38 this season, so you're talking about an aging goaltender. Who's had some injuries over the last couple of years as well. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, I see them taking a step back, which isn't a bad thing. I think it gives them that extra pick in the first round that they can kind of continue to build that pipeline and see more development from their young guys, which, give it a couple more years. I mean, you got guys like Nate Danielson, Marco Kasper, Michael Bransig, Nygaard, who are going to add some flair to this lineup in a couple of seasons. It's just not their time. I see them missing the playoffs as well. The last bubble team from last season would be the Buffalo Sabres. And this team is going to be something this year. They've got a lot of exciting players coming up. What is your take on the Buffalo Sabres this season?
Ooh, look out. Look out, because I think this is a team that's also going to do some damage as well. I think again, the big factor is going to be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. If he's able to be that legitimate starter that they've been hoping for, fantastic. I think you're going to look at a resurgence from Tage Thompson. You're going to look at, Rasmus Dahlin, who's just named captain, take the next big step further in his career. You got a steady back end of Owen Power. Bowen Byram was a great addition at the deadline. Didn't really kind of move the needle for the playoff run, but I think a full season in Buffalo right now, I think is going to help him out. And I think this team is definitely going to have that momentum. And again, there's always a stretch every single season where they always start off hot, but then they go on a massive cold streak following that. And I think if they're able to avoid that one long cold streak and mix it in with some wins here and there, then this is going to be a different situation for them. I think that with Thompson, Cousins, Alex Tuck, looking at Peyton Krebs, he was also signed. He's going to be a good depth option. JJ Peterka, I think, is going to take a big step forward. I think look out for him as sort of a name that could break out for the Sabres. And you have to look at some of their prospects coming up too. At some point, are they going to earn a call up? You got to look at the likes of Yuri Kulik, Isaac Rosé, Konsta Helenius was sent back down. Victor Neuchev, Anton Wahlberg. Those are some of their top prospects and names that could fill out the middle six and could make an impact possibly this season. I think a select few have that chance, but in the foreseeable future. Again, if goaltending shores up, this is a team that, like Ottawa, could definitely push for a playoff spot. Whether that's more of a certainty, I think I feel more comfortable putting Ottawa into that playoff picture more so than Buffalo, but they're going to make it interesting.
Yeah, so I'm going to be the opposite of you. I think Buffalo makes the push this year. I think they grab one of those wild card spots, and man, there's just so much excitement in this lineup this year. Obviously the goaltending is again. I feel like in the East in the Atlantic Division we keep going back to goaltending, but Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen still a young guy. Devin Levi still a young guy. James Reimer's been brought in as that veteran presence, and we're familiar with James Reimer, obviously being in Toronto. But he is getting up there at 37 years old. The one thing worth noting is look at active goaltenders right now. How many have played 500 career games? James Reimer's on that list. He's a guy that's been consistent over his career. Not always consistently good, but he's been consistent, and I think he could be a difference maker in net for this team. In saying that, your top line, Paterka, Thompson, Tuck. Your second line, Benson, Cousins, and Quinn. And then you jump into
I forgot even Zach Benson. Yeah,
Zach
good thing you
Benson's
brought him
gonna
up.
be
There you go.
this year for sure. Then you jump into that third line with probably Jason Zucker, Ryan McLeod, and Jordan Greenaway. That's going to be a tough line to play against. It's going to be a shutdown line. They're going to add a lot of flair to this lineup. And then that leaves Peyton Krebs as your fourth line center. That does not include guys like Sam Lafferty, who's there right now. Noah Ostlund, who had a bit of an interesting year last year. Yuri Kulich, who you mentioned. Those players aren't technically right now in their top four lines when it comes to their depth chart, but could very well be part of that third to fourth line and add more depth. You look at that back end, you're talking about Dahlin, Joka Harju, Bowen Byram finally gets a full year, hopefully, assuming he stays healthy. Connor Clifton, he's a puck-eating machine. Then you have Owen Power and maybe the highest paid non-performer so far, Matthias Samuelsson, as your number 6. I just don't see holes in this lineup unless they have injuries.
Mm-hmm.
That said, it is one of the youngest teams in the NHL right now if you look at their team as a whole. So it will be interesting to see how those young guys come together. It could be the best thing for them. This could be like a collegiate team going out every night and having a good time and going out and getting wins and getting together after the game. Like, we don't know how the culture in that room is going to be, but I'm excited to see what they can do, and I think they push the needle. I think they finally get to the playoffs, which is huge because they hold the longest streak right now for not making the playoffs in the NHL. So I've got Buffalo in the playoffs. I've got Ottawa out. You're the opposite. I like it. I like the little bit of differing.
The thing is,
here.
We agree most of the time on everything. It's good to have that little differing of opinions every now and then,
Yeah, exactly. We got to get to the top 3 here. I want to get your take on the Tampa Bay Lightning. This team wasn't as loyal as their captain was. Said see you later. Wasn't willing to pay him. They brought in Jake Gensel. Now Steven Stamkos is playing on Broadway. What are your thoughts on the Tampa Bay Lightning now without Steven Stamkos in that room?
It's a big hole to fill. I mean, you look at Steven Stamkos every single year, like he's always at least good for 40, 50 goals. And again, that's not to say that, bringing in Jake Gensel was, a bad move. It definitely was. You do replace some of that goal scoring ability, but he only cracked 40 goals twice in his career. Steven Stamkos is a legitimate 40 goal scorer every single time. So you're subtracting some goals. And even last season where, he was dealing with some injuries, scored 22, 30 in total, which is great. But, you would love to have those extra 10, 12, 15 goals from a goal scorer of Steven Stamkos' caliber. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the rest of their lineup looks pretty much intact, but it doesn't, I feel like it doesn't quite move the needle where they're definitely going to be one of those teams that could be a massive threat. I think they're going to be great, but I don't think it's going to be the same thing as they were last year. If you have Gensel, Point, and Kucherov as your top line, I think that you're set right there. Like that is a very steady line. And then you have, the likes of Cirelli, Hagel, throw in Sheary or Nick Paul in there as well as a second line. You got decent depth, but it doesn't quite move the needle for me. Like, you have a good top six, but that's about it. I think adding JJ Moser was a decent add. I think you do fill out some of that on the back end. But if you're a goaltending tandem, it's still going to be Andre Vasilevsky and Jonas Johansson. Nothing against Vasilevsky, but he was not Vasilevsky last season. If you're going to go far, you're going to have to rely on him big time. You're going to have to give him more starts. You're going to hope that he's healthy, because Jonas Johansson, again, didn't have the goaltending that they needed early on, and they were lucky that Vasilevsky came back, because he was one of the reasons why he pushed that team into the playoffs. Don't quite see it right now. I think the hole on the wing with Stamkos gone is going to affect them. I think goaltending is going to be key. But to me, I think either they're just going to hang on for dear life or miss out on the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I was on another show recently with Mike Fink over at the Hockey Writers, and I said to him, like, right now, if I told you to take a wild guess at who backs up Vasilevsky, because Vasilevsky's played the most games out of any goaltender over the last 5 years, who would it be? And he could not name Jonas Johansson. So, I mean, it goes to show you that there's a lack of depth there. He is obviously going to be tired. Fatigue's going to play a factor. The injuries are starting to play a factor. McDonough's on your second pairing on defense. He's pushing 38, 39.
Oh, and you don't even have Mikhail Sergachev back.
And you don't have Mikhail Sergachev
so there's another massive subtraction.
There's a lot of holes. Stamkos did everything, right? Stamkos did everything. He played a 200-foot game. Jay Gensel's not that same player. And Jake, that takes nothing away from Gensel's game. He's a goal scorer, but he's not a Steven Stamkos.
Yeah.
This team's going to take a major step back. Is it enough to knock them out of the playoffs?
If a team like Buffalo or Ottawa sees that opportunity.
If Buffalo and Ottawa can make the push, I think Tampa Bay's got to be your team that comes out. And, it's their time, right? Like it's time to kind of take that drop off. You've recycled players throughout your consistent runs here. It's time to maybe take that push back and see what you can get draft time. But our last two Atlantic Division teams, the Florida Panthers. Where do you got the Stanley Cup winning Florida Panthers? They've lost some people as well. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Anthony Stolarz, and Steven Lorentz. So what are your thoughts on the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, it seemed like we were just taking some of their key depth players in their cup run. I assume we're just skipping over Boston because we already touched up on Swayman being the major issue, right?
Yeah,
being the X factor.
I do. I'll say it. I'll say it before we jump over them. I don't have Boston in the playoffs. I think there's going to be a culture shift in this team. They've still got an extremely solid lineup, but they've made a lot of changes over the last year. Injuries will play a part, and I can't see them overcoming this offseason debacle with Jeremy Swayman. I don't see it happening. So I think they're going to be an odd team out, actually. So I don't have them making playoffs.
Yeah, I think if you start the season and Swayman isn't your starter and it goes on longer than it is, yeah, it's going to be a big detriment. I think if you're betting on Elias Lindholm, who's a solid two-way center, to have a bounce back performance to maybe get 60, 70 points, great. But, where's that balance going to, where's the chemistry going to be? How's that going to form in? I think Dmitry Orlov was a good ad, but, more he's going to be on the third pairing. It doesn't quite move the needle. Or if he was in the top four situation, maybe it's a little bit different. But yeah, I see them like Tampa. One of those two teams are coming out for one of those ones that are going to push forward into the playoffs in Ottawa or Buffalo. So that's where I stand with Boston as well. To answer your question initially with Florida, I think you got to keep them up top. I mean, they're the Stanley Cup champs for a reason. They deserve to be the top spot heading in. And I would have, if I were to list 1, 2, 3, I really do think Florida is going to be number one. There's that. Again, there were some subtractions. A lot of their depth players gone, but I think the biggest one is the loss of Brandon Montour because of that power play factor. Again, you lose another power play player in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Aaron Ekblad isn't getting that old. I think Gustav Forsling is a good replacement for one of those two players to I thought he was very underrated last year, and he deserved that contract, that payday. You're going to rely on a lot of defensive-minded players to lead the charge, and aside from Ekblad and Forsling, I mean, I said this last year, you really don't have much, but then Florida surprised, and they were one of like a decent defensive team. But again, up front, you're still set. I think losing possibly possibly losing Carter Verhaeghe in the offseason, if he doesn't resign, is going to be a big loss for next year, but you still have him for one more year. Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart, Lundell, that's basically your main core of players right now, along with Verhaeghe up front. Curious to see the big step that Eetu Luostarinen will take, because I really liked his play last season. I thought he was flying under the radar as one of those depth players. I think he could take a big step forward. And yeah, I just can't see. Yeah, they lost some key players, but I think most of their main big boys are still intact and they're still on the roster right now. You really can't take that away from them, because those were the guys that led the charge in the playoffs, and they're still here. So they're still up at first for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think they're number one, and the only other question I have that you did not raise is, Reinhart got his big ticket. Is he a 57 goal scorer next year? I don't see him repeating as a 57 goal scorer. That said, I've been surprised before, and there's a good chance it could happen again. So I do have them number one. That leaves our Leafs with the number two spot, I think, on my list. I assume you have them in that range as well.
For now, I'm going to put them second. It depends. It all depends on if Swayman does sign. I think Boston could push for second, but I still think they're quite a few. Again, we already talked about like how they don't. And there's that already culture shift heading into this season right now that may play a factor in their standing. But I think with the Maple Leafs, yeah, you got to look at them as a second place team right now. I think defensively overall, they have looked much better. Again, they're still trying to work out Berube's system. I think Lane Lambert taking over the penalty kill has been an absolute overhaul, and we're seeing a big difference right now. They remain perfect in the preseason. Again, it's preseason, but to see the aggressiveness and the positioning that they have in their own zone is absolutely phenomenal. I really loved the way that their goaltending tandem has kind of worked out. Joseph Woll looked good in that first game. Again, haven't really seen much of him because it was only one game, but Stolarz looks great as a guy that could be a steady backup, possibly push for that top spot. Nick Robertson, we already mentioned how he's already starting to run away with the spot, or he's done everything that he can to earn it based on what happened this season. He's playing that Craig Berube style. You want to see if a prospect like Nikita Grabenkin could come in, play that same style, play that same game, but they're looking at Austin Matthews having another big year, William Nylander. I think for what it's worth, I know it was preseason, but I really did like Mitch Marner's game. I think I maybe saw a little bit more, not necessarily bite. Sorry?
A little bit more give a shit.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Again, it was more that type of play where we don't see him as a physical forward or a physical, player, but there were times where he was a little bit better and stronger with, his edges, protecting the puck a little bit better. He wasn't, being shoved off as much. So I think that's going to be key for him. I think being on the half wall on the power play is going to work wonders. We saw that play that he made to John Tavares. I think it's going to be a little bit deceptive on the power play as well, because he did have success in that spot. He's also in the bumper position. I don't know. Maybe you could put William Nylander there because he's got a better shot, but I think you're going to see a type of season where it's kind of similar to William Nylander, contract year. Maybe he tries to win the hearts of the fans, but it's not the regular season that matters. It's the playoffs. If we see Mitch Marner for what he is in the regular season for once in the playoffs consistently, then you could win back the fans. And until then, there's going to be a lot of heat and a lot of eyes on Mitch this season because of that, but I think he's going to be up to the task. And I think having, like a coach like Berube to keep him grounded, to keep him focused, I think could help. So up front, you're still set. I really do like the depth additions that they have. And if you got to move one of Yarncroke or David Kemp out to make room for, as we talked about, what are the other players coming in for Nick Robertson, if you're going to sign Max Pacioretty, fine. I'm willing to give one of those two guys up, but I'm not willing to give up Nick Robertson at this point because he's looked lights out. And on defense, Chris Tanev looked solid. Jake McCabe's looked good. I really liked Marshall Riff. I actually have a piece coming out that he was one of my standouts, and he could push to be one of those depth defenders or at least be one of the first call up on defense, because this is a guy that literally just, pounded with Uri Slavkovsky in a fight after they were shoving each other and he was grabbing his hair, and it was just took one punch to get him down. And Slavkovsky's the bigger player, and Riffai managed to take him down in one punch. So that's one thing you don't want to do, is get into a fight with Marshall Riffai, because he is a tough customer and he adds that defensive game penalty kill aspect to his repertoire as well. So I do like where the Maple Leafs are at right now. I think they're going to be a better defensive structured team. I think they're going to be better on the penalty kill. Power play, they look a little bit more dangerous thanks to Mark Savard. I just see a lot of things going right for them right now. Hopefully they could push for the first spot, but it's tough to compete with the Stanley Cup champs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you nailed everything right there. I don't have much to add. Like I said, I have them in my number 2 spot. We're gonna do the Metro a little different. We're not gonna run through the teams as quickly. We'll just as detailed. We're gonna kind of do our layout of it. But before we get to that, quick note from our sponsors over at BetterHelp. This podcast and the Hockey Podcast Network is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, when we were kids, we're always looking to learn new things. We love to learn. As adults, you don't make as much time to do that anymore. We lost that in our childhood. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? At the end of the day, therapy has helped me through my roadblocks. I didn't try BetterHelp, but BetterHelp is available online to those who don't want to make the trip to, let's say, a therapist's office. Instead, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. So like I said, we're just going to kind of run through this last division. We're going to try and put together another episode to run through the West, as we have a little bit of a time constraint on this episode because of yours truly. But I want to get your feel on the Metro Division, because there's a lot of things that have changed. Obviously, Columbus isn't where they were a month and a half ago. Rest in peace to Johnny Gaudreau. The Flyers are in a different boat now in terms of goaltending, and we won't even get into that. But you have the Hurricanes, the Blue Jackets, the Devils, the Islanders, Rangers, Flyers, Penguins, Capitals. Give me your 3 that are going to be the top 3 in the division. And then I want to know why your bubble teams are where they're at and who's missing the playoffs in the Metro Division this season.
So top 3 are going to be the New York Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes, and New Jersey Devils. New York, I don't think I need to go into too much depth there. Same with Carolina. I know that they've had, a couple pieces in, couple pieces out, but they're still a dangerous team. I think Aho, trying to blank here. I got Svechnikov, Aho, Svechnikov, Natchez. A lot of those players are still there. You lost Jake Gensel because of the offseason, the move and everything like that. But their roster is still pretty much intact. So I'm not going to fault them for anything like that. It's still solid defensively. I think they've got a really great D-core that they're going to still be in conversation to be one of the top 2 teams. And the New Jersey Devils, Luke Hughes is going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. I think they'll be able to manage that because they still got a steady roster. And like I mentioned about Ottawa, Boston, goaltending is going to be key. I think Jacob Markstrom is going to be a breath of fresh air, and he's going to be on a solid team right now where he could be the backstop and have, a little bit more consistency in front of him. I know New Jersey's lacked that in the past. Sheldon Keefe has that going for him. In New Jersey, they now got a starter, and even Jake Allen as a 1-2. I think that's going to be one of the top goaltending tandems in this league right now. So I think they're going to. Last season was a big step back. I think they're going to take that big step forward and be one of the top 3 teams. In terms of my bubble ones, it's going to be the New York Islanders and Washington Capitals still. I did like some of the moves that Washington made. And also, if you're still going to have an aging Ovi still push 30, 40 goals to chase down Wayne Gretzky's record, I think that's going to be big. Charlie Lindgren, I think, proved that he is going to be the starter. That's why I guess that is the big reason why they traded out Darcy Kemper. They got Pierre-Luc Dubois. Hopefully he can find some consistency and turn things around. We'll see. Same with the New York Islanders. It's not that they've been bad, but they've just been average every single time. And you don't really have a lot of players that move the needle to make them a little bit more lethal. And I think because of the fact that, again, Ilya Sorokin, Jacob Markstrom, Frederik Andersen, Igor Shesterkin, you're going to have a lot of great goaltenders battling for that spot or battling to keep their team in it. I think Sorokin, nothing against him, but I think just the Islanders as a whole, they really didn't make enough moves to push them forward. So I think he's going to be busy and he's going to do everything he can to help his team win, but it may just not be enough. As for teams missing out, I still don't see the Pittsburgh Penguins making the playoffs at any time soon. I don't think the addition of Rutger McGroarty is going to change anything for that. Sid signed for another few seasons. I think this is just the last hurrah, but I don't see them I can't see them making any significant impact or change to go forward because of where they're at. I still think the Erik Karlsson deal was a non-factor or shouldn't have been done. Mm-hmm. I do think maybe the Philadelphia Flyers could leapfrog the Pittsburgh Penguins in any situation if, again, they find some steady goaltending. And also, if you're looking for some primetime, offensive magic to watch, Matvei Michkov is going to be worth a ticket of admission right now this season because he's just tearing it up in the preseason. And unfortunately, the Columbus Blue Jackets are still going to be at the bottom. Again, like you said before, rest in peace, Johnny Gaudreau. I think we're still reeling from that. I think the team is still reeling from that. But overall, heading into the season, I think they were still going to be at the bottom. Because they're still in that, mode where they're still drafting, they're still developing. They have a lot of players that can make the jump soon, maybe get some full-time work in there as well. But a lot of their best players and key players are still in the juniors, are making that transition up as well. So again, a lot of good pieces. David Jiricek, Dayton Mitecha, Caden Lindstrom, I've been a big fan of his throughout the tail end of 2023 and in his draft year. So they got a lot of strong pieces coming forward, but they're still going to be at the bottom of the Metropolitan.
Yeah. So, I'm going to agree with you on the top 3. I think it goes New York, New Jersey. I think Carolina falls off a little bit for what they gave up for Gensel, and obviously he walked. So I think that's my ranking 1, 2, and 3. The bubble teams, I actually have the Flyers and Capitals. I think the Flyers made a real push. I think they bought into John Tortorella last season, and I think they're willing to buy in more this season. Plus the addition of Matvei Michkov, this kid's gonna be unbelievable. I think back to Kirill Kaprizov and what he could have been if he came over when he potentially could have. And just the skill level that he brought even when he did come over. So that's what I'm seeing with Michkov. He's going to be very interesting to watch this season. We heard all the rumors about his attitude issues, after his draft season. So whether that plays out or not, I don't know, but it's going to be fun to watch him. I think the best coach for him in the NHL might be John Tortorella. And I think the Capitals have added a lot. You've got John Carlson back for a full season. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a difference maker. You mentioned some of the guys. Rasmus Sandin's a guy that isn't talked about enough. He is a difference maker. He can hit. He can block shots. He can make plays. And then obviously the addition of their goaltending as well. And they got Logan Thompson as well. So that's a incredible backup for Charlie Lindgren if he seems to falter. I got to say I'm with you with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think that we talked about Kyle Dubas' biggest mistake as a Leafs GM. I think his biggest mistake as the Pittsburgh GM was signing Erik Karlsson. You have zero pipeline when it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Erik Karlsson was this almost like this move that he had to make to set the tone early of what he was going to do as the president and GM of this squad. I think it was a big mistake. I think it's an aging team, and that's no knock on Crosby. Crosby carried this team last year. He did an incredible job. I think he's going to do it again this year.
Even Malkin still looks good at an old age. So
yeah, he
still looks like he's still got a lot left in his tank. But how much can they carry forward?
Exactly. This guy's like an ageless wonder. Aside from that, I got the Islanders on the bottom. I'm not sold on Patrick Waugh coaching in that system. His system doesn't match Lou's system, and that's where my mind's getting a little tangled with it. They have a lot of talent. Barzal, Horvat, you name it. They've got talent. Varlamov's still got it in net. Sorokin's still got it, but there's just too many question marks with that team. I just see them on the outside looking in, and they play such a defensive game, and it's a consistently offensive driven league nowadays. So I'm just not sold on them, and it'll be interesting to see where they go with it. But regardless, I think that's how the Metro breaks down. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be a dogfight, and honestly, it could come down to the Metro taking both wildcard spots, or Buffalo could squeak in. And I'd be willing to put a future on Buffalo making the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll jump on DraftKings, use the code THPN, and throw a future down on Buffalo Sabres to make the playoffs. But we'll see what happens. Outside of that, like I said, we're going to jump on for another episode to try and break down the West, even if we get a couple games under our belt before that starts, because the NHL season kicks off overseas on Friday, which is insane. We're back to the 2024-25 regular season. As we mentioned last episode, we got a lot of exciting things happening with the Sticks and the Six podcast, with the Hockey Podcast Network. So stay tuned, stay involved. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube. We're continually growing. We're continually knocking our numbers way out of the park. It's a lot of fun to do this weekly with you, Peter. And
absolutely.
Before we close it out, my friend,
likewise,
is there anything you wanted to shout out to our listeners?
Be on the lookout. I got 2 pieces coming out tomorrow. One about the Maple Leafs, one about a little fun thing that I managed to do for the website to cover an event. Recently came out with something about it last week. It was about the NHL Prime event for Monday Night Hockey, as well as their series for that. But there's something Face Off Inside the NHL, which is premiering and debuting Friday, October 4th on Prime. So if you got a Prime subscription, you do not want to miss that series. Yeah, enjoy it. It's definitely going to be something.
Yeah, awesome. I look forward to reading that. Before we shut it down, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. As I mentioned, check out all of our socials down at the bottom. Check out SeatGeek up in the corner there. $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek when you use code STICKSINTHE6. And as I mentioned, Indie Ale House will be joining us again for season 5 of Sticks in the Six. We're very excited.
Trying to point up to the logo,
as
best as possible.
There's going to be a lot of stuff coming from us with Indie Ale House. We likely will be going live again in Toronto. So if you're in Toronto, you want to stop by for a beer at some point, make sure you do it. It's going to be a lot of fun. You get to know us. We're a lot of fun to talk to, and we know our hockey. So anyways, with all that said, make sure you tune in next week for episode 175 as we break down the West. We get into the regular season. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. And with that said, the off season is nearly over. Go Leafs, go.